Welcome back to the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael,
And I am James.
and today we are discussing Doctor Who and the Horror of Coal Hill, which was a short story, and by short I do mean short, a 17-page total story written by Gavin Collinson. It was released online for the 2017 Adventure Calendar, which is a thing that the BBC official website used to do. It was like one of those advent calendar things of past, and the idea was it would sort of give like a little gift for each day of the month, well, up to Christmas anyway. Things like, oh, what's this say? Games and desktop wallpapers and music clips and such, and occasionally short stories and novellas. And this happened to be one of the quote unquote gifts for the 2017, which I think was the last time they did one. At the very least, the last time I see one documented. So it's sort of random, but sort of playful. And because of that, this was, of course, released in December 2017. And this guy, Gavin Collinson, also worked on a short story called Snowfall with Mark B. Oliver, which was released in a 2010 adventure calendar, which you could also find online along with this one free on, like, I think what's it, a PDF file, I imagine.
Yeah, they're both PDF files. From what I recall of Snowfall, one, I really like the cover it has. And two, I think that one's about, 40 pages. If I recall correctly, it's kind of a collection of seemingly unrelated stories until they all get they all dovetail together at the end. So that's kind of nice. Have you not read it? I'm not sure how the quality is or whatnot, but again, I like the cover. And it is available for free legally on the official BBC site, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and as for this one, Doctor Who and the Horror of Coal Hill, it features the First Doctor pre Unearthly Child, so it's sort of playful. And there's actually a few surprise faces too, but we'll talk about that in like 3 seconds. First of all, here's the plot, which I wrote up, and it sounds a lot more dramatic than what you might get. Hoping to pick up Susan from Coal Hill School, the Doctor instead finds himself facing an ominous fog and the werewolves within. And it's pretty much as it says there. The Doctor goes to Coal Hill School with the intent to pick up Susan and take her back to the lovely home in the junkyard, which is still sort of amusing to me. And instead finds himself facing one, a fog that's not really a fog, and two, the creatures within the fog being space wolves, which is always playful. When he gets to the school looking for Susan, he runs into a woman, a teacher named Savani, and he's of course asking where Susan might be, and they have a somewhat amusing conversation. And one thing I'll say is that the first Doctor seems to be characterized pretty well here. Even though it's a short story, I think they do decent justice with his characterization, which is nice.
Yes, he's as much of a dick as you would expect the First Doctor to be. He answers the questions that he quite reasonably asks. Oh, well, what's Susan's last name? What year is he in? Because he came here to find Susan. She's just trying to help him. And he's like, oh, no, she's 73. Oh, we're in 1963, my dear. You, me, everyone else is in 1963. Obviously, what she meant is what grade. And it's not completely on purpose, but it's also because he doesn't care. I mean, this is a pre-heroic Doctor. He says literally himself in the story, oh, I'm not your protector, which is something I don't think a single Doctor in the future would ever think of saying, besides Matt Smith, in his post-Angels Take Manhattan time, perhaps. And maybe as opposed to the 12th Doctor. I wasn't saving him, I was saving us.
Yeah, I was going to say, if any Doctor would say that, I can see Capaldi doing it.
I really wish they had run with the Doctor question if he was a Golden Man story out for a lot longer than one season.
But one nice thing about this, speaking of the 12th Doctor, is that, and I didn't know this going in, I knew very little about this, to be honest, aside from the cover, but there's actually a brief appearance from the 3rd, 11th, and 12th Doctors. For the 3rd, it's like a handful of paragraphs, but we also get a bit of 11th and 12th Doctor action, along with some Sarah Jane Smith, in both the 3rd and 11th Doctor sections, and references to a handful of other people such as Barbara, of course, the First Doctor companion, Luke and Clyde, who were in
Yeah, they were in the Sarah Jane Adventures, which I have seen all of, but my brother's only seen the first two stories?
Well, I saw a handful of episodes. I saw the Mad Woman in the Attic once.
Oh yeah,
So
you've kind of grazed a little, but you haven't actually watched it with any real consistency.
yeah, I've grazed the fields, but I have not eaten the grass, as they say.
That's terrible. But yeah, there are references to Clyde, Luke, and I'll talk about that later in the timeline section about where these stories take place for all these doctors. But it was nice the references we got during the third Doctor time, who gets the least amount on page. It's still kind of nice because he's just talking to Sarah Jane about this adventure that happened to him. He's just going through Coal Hill School. And again, he's relaying a story, an adventure that he had as the First Doctor before the First Doctor became more heroic, which only happened in the, was it, fourth episode, maybe third episode of An Unearthly Child. So this is a doctor who did something I don't think you'd see many doctors do. When he came out of the fog that wasn't actually a fog into the school, he, realizing that danger is about to come, I'm not sure exactly when he realized that, but nonetheless, he uses, I suppose, a very early appearance of the sonic screwdriver, because certainly enough as the first Doctor with one in the show. He uses it to lock all the doors around the school, and no one who's outside in the fog who's banging the doors to be let in because something's out there. Very missed, actually. Of course, the Stephen King short story, which was made into an inferior movie, and I was take by that claim. The short story is better, but the scene's very reminiscent of that, and the Doctor just locks the doors and these people can't get in. The Doctor says, oh, they'll find somewhere else to go. And the woman and another teacher, they're horrified because that's not what you should do according to them. You should let them in to make sure they're safe.
Well, I'm pretty sure he wasn't saving them, he was saving us.
Well, see, the First Doctor perhaps would have some good conversations with Capaldi, and it's kind of funny, of course, they literally meet each other in, I've only seen it once, what was it called?
What, Twice Upon a Time?
Yes, Twice Upon a Time. Which, see, this story had about the writing of the First Doctor. For as small and quasi-pointless as it is, this story still has a better characterization of the First Doctor, as far as I'm concerned, than Twice Upon a Time did. But I suppose we'll get there eventually. And it's just, you're not going to see too often the Doctor literally locking doors to stop people from being able to get into a safe place. But this Doctor does it with literally no hesitation. And again, the third Doctor is relaying this story to Sarah, and Sarah's just horrified looking at him. What, you locked the doors? And the third Doctor's kind of ashamed, but at the same time, that's what happened. So not much he can do about it now.
And it's in those moments when you're sort of switching between POVs and doctors and such. There's these paragraph breaks, but even so, it seems somewhat clunky and haphazard. And even though this is a short story, again, it's only 17 pages, it does sometimes feel a bit, I don't know, disjointed maybe to read through. Because, yeah, we get these little paragraph breaks, but I'm just not sure if it's enough indication.
The woman who he had this encounter with, Savani, who I'm not sure, I suppose he must have been a science teacher. I suppose they must have had more than one. I guess that would make sense. She survived this encounter, and the times we see the 11th and 12th Doctor, they are meeting with or about to meet with Savani in, of course, the future to commemorate, I suppose, this story, although, I don't know, did anybody actually die? I'm not sure why the Doctor cares so much to actually commemorate it in the first place now that I think about it. Did maybe that one teacher who we saw get turned into a werewolf stay a werewolf? Because there was no mention of him, I don't think, after the fact when he turned into a wolf. And by the way, that happened, but the character is so unimportant, I already forget his name. And we read this literally 20 minutes ago.
Well, maybe he's just commemorating the fact that she taught him humanity. Then he forgot to be taught again by Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it could be that. It would almost make sense because, again, the third Doctor scene is with Sarah Jane, and that's not one of these. Well, he might have had a rose now that I think about it. And the other Doctors it mentioned had flowers on them. Again, I suppose to give to or commemorate the events. But I don't know, it seemed kind of strange to me. Nothing happened that was out that worthy of needing to remember as far as I'm concerned. But maybe it was as simple as, hey, she was the first human who the Doctor actually felt a kinship toward, and thought maybe I sure try to help these people, even if it didn't latch onto his morality system quite that quickly.
And he had some pretty good lines of dialogue with Shivani. She immigrated with her family to the UK, and I think one of her parents mentioned to her the quote, "The future is what we make it," which is something that she then says to the doctor. And the doctor has this reply that I thought was quite nice. And it's a bit lengthy, but I just think it's very much worth reading. And honestly, probably the best part of the short story. Quote, "The adage, the future is what we make it. Nobody is the sole engineer of their life. Our future is dictated by a million decisions taken by other people, many of whom we haven't met and never shall. We are adrift on a sea of random. A tempest of chaos rages around us, and all we can do is try to steer through the storm, paddle with all our strength to where we want to be, and resolve to make good progress when the wind is behind us, and to hope, desperately, fervently hope, that we're not blown too far off course when the gales conspire to confound us." And he ends it with a just to capitalize on the first Doctor's characterization. But that's such a nice, I guess, look at what life is. And also, I think, probably a pretty good philosophy you have. Certainly, you can try your hardest to do something, but that's not always, and very rarely is it going to be enough. There's so many other factors that have to be accounted for, such as whatever the fuck politicians are doing, or just the nature of the society you live in. That, yeah, you can try your hardest, but sometimes and often it's probably just not going to be enough.
But if you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, according to those individualists, it's always your own fault if you fail.
Yeah, well, I just think the doctor, even the first doctor, going through this, I don't think any of the doctors would necessarily be conservative.
I would expect that. And as the song Ain't No Reason says, you can spend your whole life working on something just to have it taken away. And that's basically what this comes down to. Yes, you can do the best you can in the situation you're in, but one person's past is always going to be somebody else's past. There's a lot more going into these things than just the individual physical person. There's mental things, there's material gains that the family maybe had that another family didn't have. All of these things coalesce into what your actual chances of making anything are.
Having strong willpower is one thing, but that's just not going to be enough. Even if you want it, and you can work hard on it, you still might get screwed over by so many other factors that are entirely outside your control.
And so I don't know, it's just a nice quote, and I quite like it. And it's certainly, as far as I can tell, the best bit of writing in this entire story. Like I said, the first Doctor's written well. On the whole, the prose is rather haphazard when it switches from POVs and to scenes with the other Doctors. And it kind of does it out of nowhere, and I kind of see what it's going for. But at the same time, it doesn't make it any less disjointed.
Yeah, I would say the prose isn't necessarily bad, but certainly I think to an extent it's somewhat uninspired. Like you would expect a bit more, I don't know, threat when the werewolves are like at the doors. I mean, you'd expect maybe a bit more atmosphere too. So I don't think the prose is necessarily bad. It's just lacking sort of a nice punch.
Yeah, especially when you consider in at least two cases, we see them in danger. Then the next paragraph shows them out of danger minutes later. And it's just written so awkwardly.
Yeah, and sometimes he explains like, oh, they escaped with the ladder to the roof. Like in a few sentences after the paragraph begins. It's just somewhat awkwardly written at times. I do think the main idea of the story is decent, and I think maybe if potentially a more experienced writer, the ending especially could have a little more emotional resonance when the 12th Doctor, who is on a side note not traveling with anyone. It sounds like, in fact, he sometimes visits this woman with Claire, but Claire's not here this time, which is sort of funny. Their on and off relationship was, it's almost like a staple of their relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. During that section it mentioned that Cole Hill School was being torn down and replaced by what? Cole Hill University? Cole Hill
Academy, I thought.
Oh, yes, Cole Hill Academy.
Which I wonder if that's a reference to class or something.
It easily could be. My brother and I have never seen Class, but easily could be a reference to that. Or something that is seen in that. I think it came out at around the same time.
Like, because honestly, I can't remember when Clara taught there. Was it still Cole Hill School?
I mean, as far as I know, it had always been that. So, yeah, I suppose it must be something new that I don't recognize. And I don't think we've seen another Doctor there since the South, have we?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I can imagine the 13th Doctor just popping up one day, looking for more farm, bruh.
I mean, I actually could imagine her doing it, but luckily we never saw that.
Back to the box.
It was a very tragic scene.
And speaking of tragic scenes, who is that mysterious woman, bruh?
Randomly, and again, we'll talk about this a little during the timeline, but we find out that the Ava Manson's ladder they used to escape to the roof, which is where the final, I suppose you would say, encounter with the wolves takes place. And for the record, it really, really doesn't matter because they gave it two sentences of explanation in this story, basically. But the entire reason the wolves are here, and they use the fog, as it were, as a kind of surveillance system, reconnaissance, to take a look around an area. But they apparently long ago fought a battle on this hill area, and of course it's named Coal Hill. And I kind of did like going into the explanation of why it's called Coal Hill in the first place. That was kind of fun. But apparently they had fought a battle here and they had left something behind and they were coming back finally to claim it. Now, what that something was, we have no idea. The story certainly didn't say.
I did like the Doctor's reply, I don't know and I don't care, pretty much.
Yeah, that was, to be fair, very on point for the first Doctor. He truly was not the hero. He truly did not give us it. But apparently, the ladder that they used to escape to the roof was just in a random janitor cupboard. And Savannah only knew about it because of an offhand reference by the caretaker at the school, who apparently was a Scottish woman. And I have to admit, if it wasn't for the fact that Washington Manson during one of the Peter Capaldi sections, I wouldn't have thought anything of it at all. But the point is brought up by Capaldi. Wait, was he wearing a purple dress? Which also means literally nothing to me. Like, woo, it's a dress and it's purple. But the TARDIS wiki assures me there is a reference to Missy, who of course was a Scottish woman who liked wearing dresses. So I suppose for some reason I can't even begin to fathom, Missy was just randomly being a caretaker back in the 1960s at this school. I don't know, maybe she's planning to kidnap Susan. Maybe she just wanted to look at the first Doctor. I don't know. The story certainly doesn't care enough to say why. It's just a nice little cutesy cameo, basically. But yeah, so Missy's here in the very last section for no reason. Not being antagonistic, just being there. So, yeah, that's something. I did like at the end, though, how the teacher Manson's, oh, yeah, after all of this happened, I called the police and told them to look for you. And I guess they probably just looked around the fog near the junkyard, but they probably didn't even go in. Which, of course, is probably a reference to the very first scene of Doctor Who proper, where we see the police officer just holding the light, looking around the junkyard area, and then we see the TARDIS for the first time. And so I thought that was a pretty fun reference.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't even catch that reference, or I guess I didn't make that connection, but that would actually make a lot of sense, especially with the timeline placement of this story.
Well, as listeners know, the TARDIS Wiki has a personal timeline for each Doctor, including the extensive extended media, ranging from the comic books, comic strips, Big Finish, and BBC Audio, the multiple book ranges, and everything in between. Doctor Who canon, insofar as it actually has one, is a jumbled mess and has been forever, so I just like to see where the stories we're discussing fit into the universe as a whole, as continuity in the narrative timeline has always been of interest to me. And for this one, we're not going to go into the more specifics for any Doctor besides the first, because this was mainly, on the whole, a first Doctor story. The other three Doctors were basically not quite cameo roles, but close enough where I don't care to get into the more specifics. We should talk about it for a little, though. But for the first Doctor, the story that takes place before this one is an unearthly woman, which you might be able to guess, maybe not. One, the name's obviously based on an unearthly child, but that was a Big Finish toy from the Diary of River Song, Series 6, which was released in August 2019. And I don't know much about the Diary of River Song. It's happy that, what's the actress's name? Alex Kingston, is it?
Yeah, that sounds right.
It's nice to know that she's getting a lot of work from Big Finish, although I suppose that's sort of be surprising. Alan, really, her character is one of the perfect characters you have long-running Big Finish series. And we have not listened to any of those yet. But I did spend some time yesterday downloading literally every Big Finish thing I have onto my cell phone Big Finish app. So maybe you'll actually walk through a Big Finish stuff faster. So fingers crossed that actually works. Hashtag not likely, but there's a chance. Right after this, and this almost feels like a cheat to count, but the TARDIS Wiki counts it, so who am I to argue with the best Doctor Who fansite ever created that I know of? And that would be Prologue the First Doctor, which was a one-page prelude starring, the First Doctor, to the Supremacy of the Cybermen Titan miniseries. Titan, of course, being the publisher. And Titan like to have these big events every year that were multi-Doctor stories. I believe in 2015 or whatnot, it was the 4 Doctors. In 2018, I believe it was the Lost Mansion, maybe the 2017. Either way, they liked having these multi-Doctor stories. And this year was no different. Promise of the Cybermen was, I believe, either 4 or 5 issues, mainly starring Doctors 10, 11, 12. And I think there's even some Gold War Doctor action as well. But every single Doctor got a small one-page cameo story in a Doctor Who comic that came out around the time, just to give a little taste of what you could see in Supremacy of the Cybermen. And basically all of these stories were done in a universe where the Cybermen had actually kind of taken over. So things are normal, then things get very abnormal, and the Cybermen rule supreme. And of course, being one page, there's not really all that much to it. And as you see on the screen, we'll just post at least part of it here. Basically, all these small scenes are things that I suppose happened, but they all get reverted due to the ending of Supremacy of the Cybermen. So it's kind of an alternate universe thing, and it kind of doesn't really happen, but it kind of happens. But either way, that's what happens right after this. And for the record, the next thing of real importance is just an unearthly child. So, hey, I works out. And for the record, this small little prelude was in. And if you haven't read any of the Titan comic series, and if you don't know much about them, this is the very convoluted way they decided to name the series. Doctor Who, the 10th Doctor, Year 2, Issue 12, which is where this story was in, this prelude. All the main Doctors of the current era, the 10th, 11th, and 12th, each had 3 years of series, which were actually more of a year and a half because they're usually 16 issues or so. Each one just the 11th Doctor Year 2, the 10th Doctor Year 3, the 9th Doctor the miniseries, randomly the 3rd Doctor the miniseries, the 4th Doctor the miniseries, and something happened in the production for the 13th Doctor, which he only got, I think, 1 series. So I'm not sure how he gets screwed out of that or what happened in that situation. But I don't know, it's kind of a mess if you're looking at these stories and you just see on the side, 10th Doctor Y2 issue 12, and you have to figure out exactly what that means in TARDIS Wiki code. But either way, that's where you can find this, and all of them have also been reprinted in a collection of the Supremacy of the Cybermen stories, if that would be an easier place to find it, which it almost certainly would be. As for the other 3 Doctors, just in January, like I said, I'm not going to get very specific into these. The 3rd Doctor is at the time with Sarah Jane as a companion, so you can kind of place it in your own head there, at least in January, where that section, as my brother said, a very small section would have taken place. And also, as Michael said, the 11th Doctor is also talking to Sarah in his section, and makes reference of Clyde, which places it after Death of the Doctor, which was a story of the Sarah Jane Adventures, which my brother has not actually seen, but he knows enough about it where it's not too much spoilers for me to say Matt Smith shows up in the episode. And as for the 12th Doctor, he is at least knowledgeable enough of Missy, where he's at least concerned about the Scottish woman Savannah Manson's, and he also is telling her about a scene we see in The Witch's Familiar, the second part of the opening of Series 9 of the Revival series. It's actually rather amusing because it's a scene I like a lot. The scene where the 12th Doctor is talking to Davros, and Davros makes a joke that the Doctor actually laughs at. And so that was a nice little moment to see, even if it's just a reference. And those are just, again, not detailed placements, but just general placements for where these are taking place for each of these doctors.
Yeah, and like we said early on, I do think it's interesting to have a pre-Unearthly Child First Doctor story, such as it is, even if it's not exactly the best writing or the most engaging material. It's still sort of fun. It's hard to say it's something that's really worth reading. I mean, we pretty much gave you the best quote in the story, so once you have that, I'm not sure if you need much else. But it's only 17 pages, so if you're into the First Doctor, I don't see a big reason not to read it, which isn't much of a recommendation, but it's sort of all I've got. It's not a bad story, but I'm not sure if it's really all that much in the end.
I mean, it feels more Doctor Who related than the Disintegrator did, to be so, but that's also not saying much. At the end of the day, it is just a 17-page story. It's free. Again, you can just find it legally online. And the encapsulation of the First Doctor's character is pretty on point. And there's not too many and Unearthly Child First Doctor stories to read on the whole. I know there are some audios, and I look forward eventually to listening to some of those. Some that come to mind are Queeness, which was actually referenced in the Ads of Destruction, and also, I believe it was The Alchemists, which is such a striking name. But either way, the story's really not going to win any awards. I'm sorry, Gavin. It's not. I doubt Gavin's listening to this. If you are, though, thanks for writing. But, I mean, it's not going to do you any harm to read it. At the end of the day, you're out 20 minutes. You read a story you might not remember in a week, but hey, it's not terrible. It's not bad. It's just, it didn't really do all that much to... It's just, at the end of the day, not all that memorable, and that's okay for a story. But also, on the other hand, it's not like we can really recommend it with all that much grandeur.
And that's our thoughts on Doctor Who and the Horror of Coal Hill. If you've happened to read this one, if you were one of the people who picked it up during the 2017 Adventure Calendar times, I mean, what a treat. But yeah, let us know what you thought about this one, how it compares potentially to other short story releases from the same thing. Be interesting to hear. But yeah, otherwise, what do we have coming up next, James?
Up next, we have another short prose story. This one, even much shorter than this one, but also much more classic on the whole. The 1994 brief encounter entitled Roses. Brief Encounter was a series of vignettes that were titled Brief Encounter that were published in the Doctor Who magazine and various spin-offs such as their spring editions and the winter special editions and whatnot, and their yearbooks as well. In between 1990 and 1994, these were usually one page, maybe on a rare occasion 2 pages. They were kind of what-if stories. What if a future Doctor met this companion at a much later date than they used to know them, for example? I know there's one where the 7th Doctor and Ace run into Dagon again from the City of Death story. And just various random things like that. There's a very touching one where Ace meets the little girl who was used by the Daleks in Remembrance of the Daleks, who was this cool girl who one of the Daleks took over. Something to that effect. And they're just these small little stories. Sometimes they were by amateur writers who were getting a first little taste of writing. Sometimes they were more established writers. But this is a story, Roses, which is written by Robert Marmon and published in Doctor Who magazine in 1994. And funnily enough, even though this is the first brief encounter we'll be discussing, it's actually the last brief encounter. But it is a First Doctor story, as it were. And I guess we're just in a little bit of a First Doctor binge, considering what we just talked about.
Yeah, and it's hard to have any type of expectation going into a one-page story, but I enjoy the First Doctor. He's a playful guy.
I have more expectations of this than I do of any TV comic story.
Well, you're not wrong, and that's probably not how to accomplish either. But hey, maybe we'll be surprised at some point.
Perhaps we would be.
Yeah, but as always, you've been listening to the Brass Mahoney, and if you want to comment or reach out for anything, you can reach us either here on YouTube by commenting down below, or you could reach out on Twitter at Brothers Mahoney. And on a related note, we have the new series starting in about 2 weeks?
Yeah, 3 weeks, 2.5 anyway, around there.
Yeah, so we are naturally going to be discussing each of those episodes after they come out. So if you want to join us for that too, well, now's a good time to do so. But thanks for spending your time with us. This has been the Braz Mahoney. I am Michael.
And I am James.
Thanks for listening and see you later.
And make sure if you're going to watch The Mist to read the short story instead.
But the movie has a better ending, come at me, bro.